can create a limiting belief for somebody else based on our language.
Absolutely.
So I was just thinking, as you're saying that my working life as an engineer was all about auditing and critiquing other people's work, creating a list of negatives that had to go back and be rectified from a safety point of view.
Yeah.
But it's interesting how in seconds you can go in and see something that's wrong. Walk into a building, even walking into my own office here, I can spot something in seconds that stands out. And potentially I could be doing the same thing with our children.
Absolutely.
Looking straight away for the negative.
Absolutely. You're wired, but that's because your unconscious brain is wired. It's your instinct. Okay, your unconscious brain it's just scanning for negativity because that keeps it safe. So it's not because you're trying to do something bad to your children, it's because you're trying to keep them safe. But actually, interesting enough, let's say, for example, I did this when I was in the pandemic. It was a great course, and I remember the guy coming in with a flip chart, and he had 4 sums. And he said, everybody in the chat, write down what you see. And everyone went, yeah, okay, 4th is wrong. Everyone put down what was wrong, and no one said 3 are right. And that's how our brain is wired. But it doesn't mean that, for example, with your children, the key is to say something. If they're naughty, you're acting naughty. Because then you take it from their identity. You're identifying the behaviour rather than the identity. At this moment in time, I feel that you are acting, naughty, or you're acting in an incorrect way, as opposed to you are naughty.
Or that behaviour is not acceptable rather than you're a stupid child.
Yes, exactly. And it's so important to take the identity away, but also to praise, criticise, praise. I think this is fantastic. That bit we could do with some work on, but overall, so that they start to see how shifting one thing can overarchingly create a better result. And
so right from the way that teachers, schooling, education, the whole way that we talk and influence our next generation all comes down to something as simple as language. I'm joined today by Jackie Cooper. Jackie Cooper is a hypnotherapist, and she's going to talk to us about some of the fantastic things that she's been doing on her journey through life. But you didn't start out in hypnotherapy, did you, Jackie? So tell me about what was your early careers doing? What have you been up to?
Okay, well, I did start actually many years ago in the dental industry. I've been in there for 30 years now. Started as a nurse and then progressed into more commercial work. Enjoyed the commercial work, actually. Started in many different roles in project management and product management, and also in sales. So I enjoyed the selling, and I was selling in Europe for many different products, and then went on and retrained into laser physics, which was really interesting, bringing lasers into yes, it is actually. So you have different lasers that can do different things. All of them are really patient friendly, so it's great because the aim of this, in the end of the day, was to make a better experience for the patient.
And then there was a point of transition. What happened next?
I think in some respects it was just before the pandemic, and obviously it made sense to retrain in the pandemic. But I think, I'd used hypnotherapy a lot, actually, for presentations, just things about slowing down. And I was using hypnotherapy, again, over a long period of time for my own mental health, and it really worked. So I started to seek it out from my family. And when I started doing that, it made a big difference because, we have children and they suffer. They suffer at school, and sometimes having somebody that can support them was what I sought out. But there was a little seed that this particular person sowed in my head saying, actually, this will be good for you one day. And that seed grew, and I realised that I'd been a fixer all my life, and many people had said to me, I'm a good listener, but I just wanted the tools. I wanted to I wanted to do more than listen.
So our voice is really powerful in so many ways when it comes to our mental health, feeling heard, but also the self-talk that we talk about inside. I know that hypnotherapy and NLP and things like this have got a long history and some very interesting characters in there, and lots of different styles and techniques. But just for our listeners, explain to me what hypnotherapy is.
So hypnotherapy, I know people think of hypnotherapy as a stage thing and they see it on TV, but that's really not what we use for hypnotherapy. Hypnotherapy is a natural state that everybody uses In fact, 90% of our day we are in the unconscious brain. Okay. So we're only 10% in the driving seat, which is quite incredible, quite worrying when you've got a son like mine that goes to work every day in a car. So, you know, I'm hoping that 10% is triggered before he goes. But generally, you know, you go on a journey if you're driving and you get there and you forget how you get there. You think, oh God, I didn't even think about the journey. Or you're chatting to somebody and I'm sure even as we talk today, you'll wander off into your own world. Yeah. That's a trance state. Yeah. So we use that because that trance state is in your unconscious brain, and majority of your actions, behaviors come from your emotions that are triggered from your unconscious brain. That unconscious brain is wired to keep you safe. So that unconscious brain holds on to things, behaviors that you're not.
So that's the brain that's controlling our breathing, and all of the other things that kind of.
Well, you've got your unconscious and your subconscious, and they're very much in control. You know, if you are in a survival instinct, then they will take over. Your little conscious brain, which is you, is often forgotten. And I think that's where most of my clients come in and get angry with themselves. They have this, as you say, the self-negative talk. I'm so angry with myself because I'm doing this. Yeah. And that is your conscious brain upset with your unconscious brain. And I teach my clients, in order to have, you know, a more balanced way of working, you have to have both brains having a voice. They need to be able to have a voice.
Do most people think that they can control their subconscious and their unconscious?
Absolutely, brains? But they don't even know it really exists. Okay. I think they spend a lot of time thinking that they do things because they consciously want to do them, but they are always doing most of their emotions come from the subconscious or the unconscious. So I think in some respects, I think most clients come to me because they picked up these bags over their life. They feel that the bags are there because they need them, but actually they don't need them. They are there to protect them. The unconscious has picked up a bag, it's protecting itself, and now they can't get through the door they want to get through because they've got too many bags.
So if they've been through an abusive relationship, or they've been through childhood trauma, or they've been through all these other things, effectively the body's just put in an additional defence mechanism to try and stop them going through that again.
Your unconscious hates that.
That's why people say that they kind of take their baggage from one relationship to another, because they've not unpacked the
They haven't, and the majority of that baggage comes from childhood, because the way our brain is wired when we're a child is very linear. You know, you'd have children, you know, in that age when they're sort of 5 to 10, they're hot, they're cold, they're thirsty, they're hungry. They don't look around corners. They don't say, oh, tomorrow I'm going to think this. So they don't have that logical way of thinking. So if something happens, or a surrounding atmosphere happens at that age, then your unconscious will try its hardest to avoid that in the future. Yeah. And by doing so, you will do actions that you don't want. You will try and avoid them. Hence, phobias come in that way. So my job is to help them to give a voice to that younger version of themselves, and to give the power and the strength, the confidence, the peace to that younger version of themselves, in order to let go of something they've been holding on to and find those bags that they don't want and put them down.
That's really interesting. From the point of view that you're there, most people think of a therapist and think, oh, the first thing you're going to look at is something from your childhood, almost like it's a natural thing to start looking at. How often do you find people are ready and receptive to kind of unwrap everything in their past when they're looking to move forward?
Absolutely. Do you know, a lot of people, and myself included, spent many years going through talking therapy, and
become very popular with the NHS at the moment.
Absolutely. And first of all, I think, you know, just going to therapy is a good part, and I think anybody really needs to be congratulated.
Because the Americans versus the kind of UK market, everyone's got a therapist in the States.
Everyone's got a therapist.
Yet the British stiff upper lip is
absolutely. We can manage
straight back. You know, carry on.
But I do think that the difference between just talking therapy and sort of the therapy I use is a mixture between cognitive hypnotherapy and NLP, because I talk to the brain that is holding on to childhood events. And what I find is most people that come in do not think that what they're feeling is connected to their childhood. Mm-hmm. You know, they always think it's because, you know, of the events that are happening in their adulthood, and actually they are almost iterating what's happened in their childhood. So their childhood is when the trauma is, where the pain comes from.
And then they keep reliving it.
They keep on protecting themselves, So the unconscious will say, I don't like that feeling. As I said to you earlier, you imagine you walk into a room, at the moment you see a chair, everyone can say, I sit on a chair, that's normal. But if your chair broke when you were 6, that chair may have a different connotation.
So then you're constantly looking for the weak chair.
You're looking for anything. You're looking for
rebuilding
surfaces.
That synapse in the brain of just firing that electric.
Absolutely. And that's the main thing that you don't realise. You just think, why am I scared of chairs? Or why does that feeling happen because of the chair? And it may be that the chair gave a feeling because there was an argument in the room, or there was something else happening in the room. So it's a complicated sort of process. But when we go back, we do a thing called timeline. We go back to where that
Gestalt therapy.
Exactly. So we go back to that earlier event, and we have a relationship with our younger version of ourselves. And that's key, because that younger version of ourselves, by giving that younger version love, and that younger version giving love back, you almost break the spell of that feeling that you're holding on to, because you're holding on to it because you think that it's protecting you, but actually it's holding you back. So it's a fine line between protection and growth in that respect.
So those early days of you taking on hypnotherapist, was there something specific that was a trigger for you to want to go and explore how to use hypnotherapy?
I think I was fascinated with hypnotherapy when I was sort of in my commercial world. And I think the most poignant one was when I lost my first child. I used hypnotherapy to get through that, and that was just mind-blowing. I think I do feel sorry for the hypnotherapist, but I felt that always stuck with me, that how powerful it can be. And I used hypnotherapy with my family and different techniques, especially NLP. So I decided to retrain. And when I went for my interview, because you have to have an interview, it's up in Regent's University, it's a full diploma. They asked me again, and I just wanted to help people, but I wanted the tools. And that's why I started to really go down and get the training.
So NLP, or neuro-linguistic programming, was a mouthful. I'm glad they shortened it down. But NLP is something that, especially through the 80s and 90s, was adopted by an awful lot of salespeople to help them, both for nefarious reasons and for positive impact as well. So just talk us through a little bit about what's the difference between NLP and say, hypnosis?
Yeah, so NLP is much more about how your brain is wired. It's the process inside your brain and understanding the brain that's doing the talking. Whereas hypnosis is much more the unconscious, conscious side, really. And I think, they have a place where I tend to use them almost together. I mix and match.
Use different tools from your toolbox.
I use an NLP technique, and I will do a timeline in the middle. So I use that. So I will use, for example, a great NLP technique called drop through. So if you've got an emotion and you find it hard, then you can drop through it, what's underneath, and then eventually you find yourself into a good emotion. But if I find an emotion in there that they just won't go through, I can timeline that back to when you first had it, and whether that was basically being held onto by the unconscious because of an event that hadn't been visualized, talked about, and almost let go. And once we've gone through that and let go, we can then go back to the drop through and go through. So I can use, if I find a layer that really is causing a lot of sort of negative energy, I can timeline that back. So I use that yo-yo effect with the mixture. But I love the NLP techniques. There's spinning, there's really understanding. I love one of the techniques where we bring both brains out, the unconscious and conscious, and they have a conversation.
That's interesting.
And I find that when I do that with my clients, a lot of them, that little conscious is so tiny. It's like a little sort of ball bearing in with this huge sort of boulder, because what you focus on grows. So my clients' unconscious is so wired for negativity because that's its job, that the little conscious saying, actually, we're okay, reality, we're not sort of worried, is so tiny. So I have to balance. I help the clients. Let both
voices get heard.
Exactly, they need a voice.
Adjust the balance. That's really interesting. You talk about different techniques, especially with NLP. I know that some of the swish technique is one that Tony Robbins is a great fan of, and I think that's for people that are very visual in the way that they learn and understand things. Things like that can be phenomenally. So different people need different tools to help them unlock things, and do you find that each client has got a very specific way of learning, or you think have got every
totally different? We're 8 billion versions of normal, and that's the one thing that I would say is unique about my therapy, is it's bespoke. I don't have a script. I literally don't. With my hypnotherapy, I was trained under Trevor Sylvester and the Quest Institute in Regent's University, and he developed this most amazing hypnosis script type of thing called word weaving, and it really is about using the client's words in order to create a hypnosis state, and that means it's completely bespoke. So I do a lot of work before I do any sort of hypnosis, finding the triggers that they want and their solution state, and build it into my hypnosis so that it's totally bespoke to them. And that's why it works so quickly, because it's their model of the world.
It's not just a case of using a preset routine.
Absolutely not.
Time and time again. It's about finding what works for them.
And it's very similar to what you said about sales, and that's why I love the being in sales many years and thinking about open-ended questions. We use wording that is almost a bit trickery. You may look back and wonder how long ago before you realise that you may have changed. These kinds of words, the brain is so tricked into realising that actually, I'm changing. I didn't even realise it. And so it's quite dramatic when you use this kind of wording. But it's got to be with their model of the world. You've got to have their solution state.
One of the reasons I started the podcast was because my version of success is very different from your version of success. And our version of success when we're 18 and young and fresh in the world becomes very different than our version of success when we hit our 50s, for example.
Yes.
And I think that, as you say there, that everybody's perception of everything is just their like kaleidoscope of the world, and just helping them to understand it.
Yes.
It's like a matrix.
It's like a matrix. And I think actually also one key thing there is, what is their filtering system? I've got people who are very auditory. And so, and also a lot of my clients have neurodiversity. I have clients that come in. I have a young guy who's 18. He came in to me, and he had given himself so many labels. So my job was to remove the labels.
Help him identify himself rather than a title.
He lost himself with the labels. But again, he said, I can't close my eyes. I can't do hypnosis. So I asked him to, he definitely had ADHD. I asked him to just use peripheral vision. So just basically relax your eyes. Yeah. I do a lot of breathing techniques. I use a lot of breathing. And then I said, if you feel like closing your eyes at a later date, then just do so. And of course, by him deciding to do it, he loves it. He went to close his eyes, and now he just closes his eyes. And so it was actually his way of, there's no script, there's no right or wrong. And you have to literally work with what you come up with. Yeah. And the unconscious will throw things at you. I mean, I've worked with some of my clients a year. Most of my clients 3 to 5 sessions, because it's so powerful. But I have some clients that a year later they've suddenly found a memory at the bottom of the cupboard that they hadn't, that because the unconscious now can trust, because it knows. And that's the difference between just talking therapy for me, that is that I can rewire memories in order for that to be let go. And when the unconscious trusts me to let that memory come up, however painful, it knows that there is an outlet. And so that can be something that comes up after a little bit of time. More memories come up where you feel, now I'm ready to let this one go.
Do you see a specific type of client or a style of client on a regular basis? Or
anyone who's got a brain
ADHD?
Anybody. I mean, some of my colleagues, there's, under the questions, many people have specialised. I really haven't ruled anything out. I work with, the youngest has been about 13 and the oldest 85, and they've all come for...
So 13, the brain is still developing massively.
Absolutely.
And you've got kind of just started painting the corner of the canvas of life.
Very, very different therapy at 13. It's much more just listening, somebody to listen to. And I think making sense of things, because again, your making sense brain is just forming at that point. But also, putting in good behaviours. And actually, one of the youngest I work with, I had a colleague of mine we have a company called Thrive, which works with parents and children, neurodiverse children and all sorts. And she specialised in dyslexia. So we went into her friend's school, and the kids were only 5. And it was crazy. We brought different colour balloons. So we had red balloons for anger and blue for calm. And we would get in the kids, which was crazy, 5-year-olds and balloons went a bit haywire for a bit. But we got them to stand with a red balloon and understand, how does anger feel in the body? Where do you feel it? What does it look like if you're looking at your friend with anger? And then what do you do about it? And it's okay to have anger. We don't want to suppress anything.
It's interesting. A lot of emotions mirror other emotions,
absolutely,
don't they? So the feeling of excitement.
Yeah, exactly. It's very close to...
Can mirror something else.
Yeah.
Massively.
And I do that, actually, because a lot of my clients who come in with especially clients who want to help themselves with sport, who get so nervous or get so upset before they play hockey, for example, that they, it's almost like it's going to hold them back. So we just move that into excitement.
Yeah.
And then, use that excitement to wire up their body, almost get it ready. So actually we change the nervousness.
Change it from nerves to an adrenaline surge.
Yes,
that then
absolutely.
Powers them through.
Yeah, exactly. So it's, it is body and soul in that respect. You do have parts therapy in there, so you can start to work on, which part do you want to change and which part do you like. And by giving them, that's the NLP side, giving them shapes and letting them actually, there's a great technique called spinning in NLP, which I use a lot with my clients, especially if they've got some kind of nervousness towards hospitals and areas like that. We can use spinning to just bring them into a nice calm state. That's the key for my therapy, is for me to give the tools to my clients, not for me to be a therapist for the rest of their life, but give them tools in order for them to fix themselves. That's the powerful bit.
So we talked about those bags as the reason someone's going to come to you is because they're carrying this baggage with them, and you talked about anxiety. What is anxiety?
So there's a difference between stress and anxiety. Stress is more of a physical manifestation. I mean, it feels you've got the same kind of feelings in the body, but a stress is, when you remove the stressor, it goes. And you've been in sales and things. You get a deadline. You're stressed up today, and you can't imagine anything else.
Your head's in the clouds.
Absolutely.
There's so
but
much
as soon as that's gone, you can go down the pub and relax.
Yeah.
So you don't think about it again. But anxiety is the voice inside. So if I was doing a presentation, for example, and standing up in front of hundreds of people, and I do that because I do a lot of lecturing in therapy, I might have stress about making sure that the microphone's going to work. Am I going to be on time? Is my slideshow going to work?
Do I look good on camera?
Do I look good on camera? Of course, yeah, exactly. But as soon as, the presentation's finished, I might go, all that stress is gone. But the anxiety, was I good enough? Did they like me?
Yeah. Am I a fraud?
Am I fraud?
Imposter
syndrome? And that anxiety then tends to come from that inner child. So the anxiety is that sort of voice inside your head, and it doesn't go, when the stressor goes. It's there, and so, which is fine. But if it eats you up, if it becomes too much, if it stops you doing things.
See, as a business owner, we can get into that kind of long-term anxiety. I mean, COVID's a really great example. So many things were changing around us all of the time. People's businesses were changing. You get notifications galore on your phone as to lockdown rules are changing and this, that and the other. And the world's going to end, in inverted commas. Absolutely. And am I still going to have a business? And it's very easy to get in that cycle of anxiety and carry it in a long term.
Absolutely. And I think that, the pandemic was very unique for most people because I guess it's a bit like going back to the war when you don't know what's going to happen around the corner. And we as humans love to know what's going to happen. It's that predicting. And that's where, our unconscious doesn't like the unknown, because the unconscious is purely there to keep us safe. It is a safety mechanism. Yeah. So if it can't see, if there's a saber-toothed tiger coming around the corner, then it starts to panic and it doesn't know, and it's the unknown. And for me, I had the same thing, because 3 days after starting my diploma, I got breast cancer. Yeah. And so I had the pandemic and breast cancer. So
that's two lots of unknowns to keep you awake at night.
Absolutely. Well, actually, no, because I was in the right place. I had the most amazing team of therapists around me who gave me skills. And the first thing I did after qualifying was spending quite a bit of time with stage 4 cancer patients. Yeah. And they were amazing ladies. In fact, I did a London to Paris bike ride for my consultant in 2022, and all of my clients at the time sponsored me. So I felt I couldn't get off the bike because they couldn't get on the bike. So, but it just empowered me to help others, because I guess in some respects, understanding that you can be okay in that unknown, and there's a resilience in the unknown, actually.
The expression that change is the only constant in our life.
Yes.
It's kind of a throwaway comment. And people, you're going through a divorce or you're going through any problems in life, you'll come out the other side. It's always thrown at you by friends and family members.
Yes.
Very few are actually in the position that you are to give somebody the right coping mechanisms.
Absolutely.
Or techniques.
And actually just not focus on coming out the other side, but just focus on where you are. Sometimes it's like, let the world go mad around you, but just be in that moment. And I don't always call it mindfulness, because my ADHD clients would say we have to do 3 things at once for them. But I think just, life is like climbing a mountain, and there's always someone putting a pebble at the top or a boulder. And we have to sit every now and again and look at a plateau and look back and see how far we've come.
Yeah.
Because that's
admire the view, because actually,
yes,
life is short.
And we have to value what we have. We have to value where we are. We have to value the moment that we're living in. And I think throughout my breast cancer journey, I valued it. I met the most amazing team. I'm now on their study for breast cancer.
Yeah.
I work with them, and they have. I mean, I did have about 15 operations. So doing the London to Paris was not easy, but my breast cancer clients got me on the bike. There was no chance of, and I think sometimes in life you do feel that there's a wobbly moment, and that's okay too. Yeah. You don't have to be always resilient. You have to but that's when you reach out to people, and that's when you have a team of people around you.
When I went through a particularly tough time in life, I learnt the compounding effect in reverse, really, that if I was going to make a decision, make another decision shortly after that locks in the first one, so there's no backing out.
Nice.
And I moved from Kent, where I'd grown up, spent all of my life, moved to the Peak District. When I got there, I knew I'd need a bunch of friends, so I made a decision about what I was going to do for a friendship circle and support network and things like that. And every single decision locked in the previous one. So actually, I'm committed now. I've got a job, I've got a house, there's no going back. And you've done that in a similar kind of way with the London to
oh my God,
cycle ride, because actually I've got a team of people supporting me.
Absolutely.
They've put money on the table,
and I did it for charity because my amazing consultant at the Royal Marsden, she has a study called My Breast, where they are putting in 3D imaging for women for mastectomies, because it gave the woman a choice and it gave the consultant a choice. And so I rode for her, I set it up for her, and I rode with all the colours on, and the whole journey I was talking about the My Breast, and also my journey. I have absolutely, cancer, everybody's, don't want to talk about cancer, but actually, 1 in 2 of us survive cancer, or although we get more cancer, there's so many more treatments, and I think we need to take the taboo out.
Stigma away from talking about cancer and how it affects people.
Yeah, I think so. And I think so. I wanted to talk a lot about it, and I was happy to show that, there were wobbly moments, but I had it's like, how can I handle it? What can I do? And as you said, what can you do to book that in? I must admit that in the January of that year, cycling in the hail, because my son said, "Are you serious, Mum? It's hailing out." I said, "I've got to do X amount of miles," because I had zero fitness, and I had to. There was 310 miles, so day one was 86 miles.
Goodness me.
And 7,000 elevation into Dover. So it wasn't an easy journey. So. Yeah. And I have to say, even now, I can get emotional just getting into Paris and standing in front of the Eiffel Tower. But, at the end of the day, that meant more to me. And I didn't want to become victimized. I understood that I'd been through a journey, but I always felt there was always somebody that was worse than me. So I thought, well, how can I help them? And that helped me, if that was so.
So one of the big takeaways from that is about the support of a community around you.
Absolutely.
In those difficult times. Absolutely. And having people that you can actually, not just sounding boards, but people that were going to give you, had fellows within therapists that were able to help you, that actually understood how to help you improve your situation as well.
Absolutely. And lean on people. If you don't feel you've got somebody at home, join a group. Join a group, because there are breast cancer supports out there on Facebook even. Just join a group, because and I used to watch those, throughout this sort of evening, and people would say, I need someone to talk to, and they'd all be ringing. I think it's important to, wherever you are and whatever you do, don't stay alone. If you don't feel you've got friends and family that can help, then reach out and find somebody. Obviously a therapist would help as well, but generally it's all about problem shared is a problem aired, and I think that's really important, actually.
So we talked about a little bit about the law of attraction before we came on air, but one of the things that's been reported hundreds of times is about the power of positivity, especially when you're in a situation like that, dealing with breast cancer, and how positivity affects our body.
Yeah, I think in some respects, they say that, when you smile, you can't feel bad. I think in some respects, I don't want to say I'm always positive, because, but I do feel that, life's too short. And I think that, when you're faced with something like that, there is going to be a wobble. There were moments. I've got 2 young kids. How am I going to sort of manage them? And I felt that I had to empower them in some respects, because we have a reality tunnel, and many of my clients come in with a difficult reality tunnel because they've had difficult messages throughout their life. And I wanted to give a positive message to my children that if they were to get sick, how did Mum handle it? And so I thought, again, it's a lesson for them. So I sat them down. I told them, before I had the I knew it was breast cancer, but I told them it was 50-50, just to ease them in nicely. And then obviously when I had the mastectomy, they were there. They were supporting their 2 boys, and they were doing all the cooking. And so they've grown in
She lived off beans on toast for a year.
Actually, they're really good cooks. They take after their dad in that one. But I have to say, they have really grown in that situation. I don't know how they will handle anything in their lifetime, but I wanted to at least give them the tools that you don't panic. You look at it in black and white. What can I do?
What are the facts?
What are the facts? Yep. Exactly.
The unknowns are unknown. So
your brain will run away. I'm going to die. Yep. And that's what I have with my clients who have got some kind of, I've got clients that come to me because they're going to go through a medical test even. Yep. And immediately they're starting to work out, how can my family live without me? And I'm going, whoa, you haven't even been for the test. Yep. But that's how your brain works. Unconscious.
What's the worst that can happen?
Exactly. Exactly. And that's not always good. I think it's really important to be realistic. Obviously, you're going to have sometimes difficult things to manage, but what support mechanisms can you build in there, and who can you lean on? And you find new friends in that journey, friends that actually, really support you through that journey. And you might find friends that don't. So I have heard a lot of people who have lost friends in that journey. I haven't, because most of my friends, I think I kind of already knew friends. If I didn't have friends that weren't going to be supportive, they weren't in the inner circle.
They weren't the right friends in the first place. Yeah. So it's almost like everything in life happens for a reason.
Yes.
We're either going to learn from it, or there's going to be a challenge along the way.
Exactly. Yeah.
So going back to some of the clients you work with, take a typical business owner. What kind of business owners would you see, and what kind of things are they holding themselves back with in life that you'd help with?
I do a lot in the dental market, so I have a lot of dentists I work with.
So are you helping those dentists with their own personal issues, or that you're helping teach them skills to use with their patients?
Both. So, with a business colleague, we recently created a platform for dentists and medical, and that's called Breathe. And I think Breathe is there for people who, it's resilience. I think sometimes, running a dental practice is stressful. But again, even from being a student now, you're worried about your perfection. And in that respect, more and more patients are looking for litigation. They will be, judging what you're doing. And of course, there's got to be a duty of care, but I think there is a lot of stress, and you've got a lot of team as well. Yeah. So we do a mixture, really. I do one-to-one with dentists, and again, that's more about them letting go of limiting beliefs, feeling more relaxed in their relationship, maybe at home, which obviously one of the things I do find with my clients is once they feel better about themselves, it's interesting, all their relationships change as well.
That's interesting.
Because around them, they start to, they feel more relaxed, more in, within themselves, happier, and others around them start to feel a bit more love from them, or a bit more understanding, because they can give more, they feel more trusting. So all sorts of different relationships change. So, again, also we do in practice or in business, where we go into practices or businesses and do more sort of training, understanding coping mechanisms, understanding the circle of concern and the circle of influence, and the circle of, coping mechanisms, and what you can influence, what you can't. In fact, we're working with NHS England at the moment because there's been difficulties with them on redundancy. So again,
really interesting conversation. We're talking about positive conversations and the power of self-talk. I would love to get hold of someone in the government and give them a really good shake, because the messaging at the moment for the NHS is come and work for the worst employer in the world, where everybody's demotivated, nobody really wants to be here, and we're going to cut and cut and cut until you all leave. I
have to say,
and the reverse.
They're lovely people.
We've got a fantastic organisation of the most passionate people that want to make a difference in people's lives and turn up every day because they love doing it, not for the financial reward. And if you put that into a HR job description, you'd be